We might want to just be a little bit shy of which kind of no. That's pretty fine, because we had a long session.
Atlantic, great sea battles, heroic discoveries, titanic storms, and vast ocean of a million stories with Simon Winchester, or Raised by the Church, growing up in New York City's Catholic orphanages with Edward Rose. After tonight's presentation, Kate Kerrigan will be signing copies of Ellis Island. And remember that if you become a museum member tonight, you not only get access to the museum for a year, but you'll be supporting our event series, our speakers, such as Kate Kerrigan, and tonight we'll give you a complimentary copy of Ellis Island. But now, let me turn the floor to the author of Banished Children of Eve, Looking for Jimmy in Search of Irish America, Hour of the Cat, and The Man Who Never Returned. He's a speechwriter and a scriptwriter. Please welcome Peter Quinn.
And I don't know how many of you noticed, but Amanda's about to produce a novel of her own there. I think it's 6 months away, right? And I'm not lying or exaggerating when I say that this is my favorite museum in New York. It's one of the only ones I ever visit. Pretty soon, of course, the real estate forces had their way, and the latest assault on the east flank of this neighborhood, the Bowery, succeeds. This institution may well be acquired and renamed by next summer the Trump Tenement and Luxury Colony. I've read it here many times, and do not leave because I am not going to read. The good news is I'm not going to do that on this visit. Instead, I want to introduce an amazing writer whom I first met on a visit she made to New York several years ago. Her writing name is Kate Kerrigan. Kerrigan is also her married name. Her unprofessional name, I don't know if that's the way to put it, or better, her real moniker is Maura Prunty. Prunty, as she reminded me, is the original name of the Bronte sisters, their father, before they left Ireland and moved to England, and the rest is history, as they say. Maura was born in England to Irish parents. She edited some of the most successful women's magazines in the UK and Ireland. She's written 8 books, is working on another at present, and resides in Killala in the wilds of County Mayo. Those of you know Thomas Flanagan's wonderful novel Year the French will be familiar with that area. And she has a husband and 2 children, 2 boys, aged 2 and 10. Now the question is, when does she get time to write, and when does she get time to sleep, and when does she get time to travel? You might ask her that when she finishes reading here tonight. Ellis Island, her latest book, is something I honestly expected to skip over when I got it. That was for 2 reasons. First, I was a speechwriter for 2 unnamed and unindicted governors. That leaves out Elliot Spitzer right here. During the centennial celebration of Ellis Island's history as an immigrant processing center, when the facilities were being refurbished and restored, I was forced to churn out enough overwritten purple prose to carry future governors through the island's bi- and tri-centennials. Second, my ancestors entered New York either across South Street during the Irish famine or later through Castle Garden. These were big, important migrations to New York, and I've always resented the way they've been upstaged by Ellis Island. Everybody's always talking about Ellis Island, and they're not talking about the other places. Despite this, Kate, her book drew me in. The quality of the writing was superb, and the story was wonderfully told, quirky and real, without the angel's robes or shroud that so often draped over the immigrant experience. I was also drawn to the book because, like my wife, I'm descended from Irish maids. And it should be remembered that among all the European immigrant communities, it was only the Irish community in which women outnumbered men. My maternal grandmother followed her sister from Cork to work as domestics in some of New York's great houses. My wife's maternal great-grandparents, also from Cork, were the cook and coachman for the Aldens of Boston. As a result, a few decades ago when I was working at Time Inc., and a colleague informed me that his family had, quote, been in the Foreign Service for several generations, I was able to reply proudly and truthfully that my family had been in domestic service just as long. Kate Kerrigan's Ellis Island tells the story of a young woman who leaves Ireland for New York during the turbulent second decade of the 20th century, which the Irish called the Troubles. She captures the contradictions between those two places perfectly. A country crawling towards nationhood and a city soaring towards global prominence. The pain and the possibilities of immigration, what's lost and gained, and that's true for every group, are all there, and she weaves them together in this book seamlessly. This is the first book in a trilogy. Lucky us. We have so much more to look forward to. One final note. Writers are all told these days that we have to be able to multitask. In the course of her adventure, she told me Morgan at one point became a licensed hairdresser. It's a service I obviously have no use of, though others might want to make inquiries when she's finished. So please welcome Kate Kerrigan.
I don't know that getting a speechwriter to introduce me was such a great idea, really, but a little bit intimidating. But anyway, thanks. Does this come down? That better? Can you hear me? I kind of have another voice anyway, so. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. This is just such a big buzz for me. I've come all the way from Ireland, and there's just nowhere more appropriate for me to be reading than the Tenement Museum, and to be introduced by Peter is just fantastic. And to have a bunch of people in front of me who aren't actually blood relations of mine. If any of you are blood relations of mine, it's just fantastic. So what I wanted to do this evening was just to read a little bit from the book, but I wanted to talk about my a bit about my family history, and I have some tapes and some audio footage of my grandmother. And I always, whenever I go to anywhere where anyone's reading, I always like to know what they're going to be doing and how long it's going to be going on for, because otherwise I kind of panic and I start looking around for the bathroom and stuff like that. So it's just basically going to be a series of very short audio tapes, and then I'll do a little reading, and towards the when I kind of feel that if I feel that I'm going on too long, I'll cut it back a bit. Actually, I was doing a reading a while ago in a library, and my sister was there, and I figured I was about a third of the way through, and just out of sheer kind of politeness, I said to people, "Can you bear for another reading?" And my sister was sitting in the front, went, "No," she said, "I think you've had enough. We've had enough." And then she looked round and she looked for agreement from everybody else. So I'm pretty sensitive. I won't keep you here all night. I'm just going to. I don't have my reader with me. 1 second.
Maybe I should read my book.
No, you're okay here. It's right here. It's right here. Just to give you a taste, I'm just going to read you the very opening passage from the book. It's quite short. The first time I fell in love with John, I was 8 and he was 10. One day, Mady Hogan called down to the house with a basket of duck eggs and asked my mother if I could play with her nephew. His parents had both died of TB, and he was sad and lonely, she said. But for his aunt coming to ask for me in the way she did, my mother would never have let me out to play with him. My mother didn't approve of boys or playing, or of very much at all outside of cleaning the house and protecting our privacy. We like to keep ourselves to ourselves, was what she always said. She didn't like us to mix with the neighbours, and yet she was concerned that our house was always spotless for their benefit. Perhaps the fact that she made an exception for John Hogan made him special to me from the first. John called for me later that day. He was tall for his age, with bright blue eyes and hair that curled around his ears. He didn't look lonely to me. He seemed confident and looked me square in the eyes, smiling. We went off together, walking and not talking at all until we reached the oak tree behind Mutty Munley's field. Before I could get the words out to challenge him, John was a quarter of the way up the oak, sitting astride its thick outstretched arm. I was impressed, but angry that he had left me standing there. I was about to turn and walk off when he called, "Wait, look." He ducked suddenly as a fat blue tip swooped past his face, then took a white cotton handkerchief out of his trouser pocket and inserted